If you're buying property to grow your money and eventually pass it down, there are three types of houses that might look like a great deal on Redfin, but instead will slowly bleed your bank account. I've spent years as a contractor and house hacked my own properties, so I know exactly what these mistakes look like and the long term damage they can cause to your financial well being. So stick around because avoiding these three could be the difference between a property that builds your family's wealth and one that quietly drains it. So if you enjoy videos like this, let me know by hitting the like button. And if you know of someone else that enjoys the topic of real estate rentals, please share this video with them. Okay, mistake number one. Never buy a beautiful property in a crappy neighborhood. Look at the duplex on the thumbnail for this video. Looks great, right? But once you know a little bit more about the property, all may not be what it seems. Let me tell you about the first house I built more than a decade ago. It was my first house. I wanted to do everything right. I wanted everything to be perfect. I wanted it to be beautiful. So I picked this great looking home architecturally when you see it from the street, and uh, just really put a lot of detail into the exterior, put a lot of hard work and detail into the interior, and it was great. Everybody that came by, because I built it for sale, everybody that came by loved it. They loved it. The problem is the neighborhood it was in was so-so. So what happens? The value of the property I built never really goes up that much because of what it's surrounded by. Also, if you drive by it now, 15 years later, it's still a gorgeous house. The problem is it's still a gorgeous house in a not great neighborhood. So that neighborhood is holding down the value of the house itself. So what happens when you buy a beautiful looking multifamily property in a not so great neighborhood? Well, number one, it's harder to get good tenants. Good tenants have lots of choices typically, and they're not going to choose to live in an area that is frankly kind of dumpy. And number two, if you do get a good tenant in there, they're probably going to leave. Like it or not, and I hate this fact, but the fact is, a lot of the lower end neighborhoods are frankly noisy, and some of them are even unsafe. One of the lower end neighborhoods that I used to live in, I remember the cops showing up to not my neighbor, but the neighbor on the other side of him. I step out on my front porch one night and I see like 5 or 6 cop cars all parked in the driveway and in the street in front of this guy's house. Come to find out, it was a domestic dispute. The guy had been drinking, and when the cops were called to respond to the incident, he ended up reaching for the cop's gun. So, not a smart move. The third problem about having a beautiful property in kind of a crappy neighborhood is you'll never get top dollar for the rent. You just can't get top dollar for the rent. People aren't going to pay top dollar to live surrounded by junkyards, or, for instance, in one of the cities I live near, there is a paper mill that smells terrible. And then there was another neighborhood that I used to drive through sometimes that had a mushroom farm near it, and that always smelled. So guess what? Because it smelled, you could never get top dollar for the rentals in there, and because it smelled, you could never sell your house for top dollar. You always had to give a discount because it always smelled in the neighborhood, like the mushroom farm. I had a really experienced entrepreneur slash real estate investor once share with me that the old saying, I'm sure a lot of you have heard it, you want the shack and the cul-de-sac, meaning you want to live and you want to buy properties on the lower end for the neighborhood in a really high-end neighborhood. You want the shack and the cul-de-sac. You want to buy, you want to live or purchase the 1,300, 1,200 square foot home that's surrounded by 3,000 square foot, 5,000 square foot mansions. Why? Because it's always going to keep the value of your 1,200 square foot Rambler at top dollar. It's really just common sense. So don't be seduced by a great price on a beautiful property in a crappy neighborhood. You will pay for this over time, especially if you plan to hold the property long term. Your return on investment will never really grow like it should. It'll generally stay flat. Here's a phrase to remember: the property will generally follow the trajectory of the neighborhood. Always, again, the property will follow the trajectory of the neighborhood. Number two, never buy far away from grocery stores, jobs, and entertainment. Renters generally want convenience first. This is a good rule of thumb. Have you heard of the phrase happy wife, happy life? Well, think of this phrase for landlords: happy renters, happy landlords. So, what happens when you buy a property that's far away from entertainment, jobs, grocery stores, and other places that people always need to go? Well, when you stick that for rent sign in the ground, not as many people are going to see it because properties that are further out tend to not have as much drive-by traffic. So not as many people are going to be aware of the opportunity to rent your property. Also, not as many people are interested in living far away from amenities. So even if they were driving by your property and seeing your for rent sign, a lot fewer of them are going to choose to live there anyway. So that means less demand to rent your property, which affects how much you can charge for rent. Not good. What does this cause to happen? This means vacancy rates go up. That means ROI goes down. Your return on investment goes down. It's a lot of cascading effects that are going to bite you in the butt later. So once again, don't be seduced by a cheap price. Buying property that is far away from amenities is going to destroy your ROI over time. Number three, never buy near wetlands. Let me tell you about this beautiful 3,000 square foot single family home that I used to drive by all the time growing up. It was this beautiful house, all done up nice and modern, and it was on 5 acres, which was a bunch of fields and trees. It was a beautiful property. The problem was about half to 3/4 of the property, probably about 2/3 of the property, was covered in wetland. Year round, it was sloshy and muddy to walk through about 2/3 of the property. So what happens? One year we have a really bad flood in the area. And I remember driving by this property and looking at it, and I see this gorgeous house that is underneath the bottom level is underneath 3 feet of water. And it looked like it was all in the house, all throughout the house. I saw them have to, after the flooding receded, I saw all the wet carpet torn out and thrown on the front lawn. So that one disaster, that probably happens once every 15 years or so, costs them a ton of money. And you don't want that if you want to hold it for generational wealth and pass it down to your kids. You don't want a place that's going to flood every 15 years on average. So if you have a multifamily property that floods, what are the effects of that? Well, if you have renters in there when it floods, the renters move out. Now your vacancy rate goes up for the year. On top of that, you have the cost of repairs you have to deal with, on top of not getting rent during that period. What's another effect? Now your insurance rates might go up because the insurance company now knows, oh, this guy's in a floodplain. They may not have known that before. If they're good, they would have found that out. But they're definitely going to know now because you probably filed an insurance claim. What's another consequence of that? Now you may have mold issues in the house, and now you have to pay to get the home professionally treated for mold. So you got to tear everything out, you got to treat everything for mold, you got to put everything back in, and you got to put brand new flooring in, replace sheetrock, possibly replace floor joists. Oh, and by the way, the whole time you're having all this work done, again, you don't have rents coming in because the place is vacant. And another side effect of living near wetlands is you'll probably get a lot of mosquitoes anyway. That'll harass your tenants. and you don't want your renters having to deal with that nonsense. Let them go deal with that nonsense on a property someone else owns, and let that be the reason that they are driven to your property, is so they don't have to deal with that. Remember, happy renters, happy landlords. So again, if you buy a property near wetlands, you may get away with it over the short term. But if your goal is a long-term investment, something to pass down to your kids, like it is for me, you're probably going to run into disaster eventually if you take that risk. So again, don't be seduced by a cheap price. If you want to hear a story about the first rental that I bought, go ahead and click here. And have a good one.